My name's Leslie, and I'll be reporting out on Table G, and hopefully I can read my notes because my handwriting is somewhat awful. So on the experience, I guess some of those words that came out in the video really were reflected here: loss, renewal, resiliency, and welcoming, and that really seemed to come out quite strongly in the first, in response to the first question of what was your experience. But then there was also the sense of a bit of an apocalypse because things happened so quickly, and that the speed of the events sort of went from 0 to 100 just immediately. And as a result, people's emotions, they experienced a roller coaster of emotions. There were concerns with the immediacy of the fires, but there were also concerns about the initial disorganization of the response, and particularly of the volunteer response, not necessarily the people, but the services, lack of collaboration, which we'll talk about in question 3. And also there appeared to be quite a bit of conflicting information. So folks didn't really know what was happening, both in terms of the evacuees' response, but also in terms of the fires. Where were the fires? How big were they? How big were they growing? What was happening to them? Were they being contained? That kind of information wasn't really available. And then folks managing with the bad air, with the smoke, just basically trying to live their lives managing with that in that environment. Question 2 around causes and enhanced impact. The causes really a raft of human and natural causes. And the impact was exacerbated because of the hot, dry, windy weather. The impact was exacerbated because of the smoke and the duration of the fires and the smoke. The impact was, I guess, higher because the mitigation recommendations from the fires of 2003 weren't really followed. But at the same time, folks did say, well, the response this time around was better than in 2003. So there's a lot more to learn from that. Also, in terms of impact, people sort of felt the emotional shock right away. And that shock kind of led to a delayed reaction, which increased confusion, which really just made the whole thing appear even more disorganized and of greater impact. There was a sense that there was competition between services, and there was also a sense that there was a lack of collaboration between agencies. And then the last piece on the impact is businesses in communities impacted by the fire were impacted severely because they'd lost a good chunk of the revenues that they would have had over the summer, and farmers were impacted through the loss of livestock and some of their growing areas. What to do differently? What actions are needed? Very strongly came through in our table was a well-developed emergency response plan before July, and begin to mobilize resources before the events happen. Looking at better coordination between service providers and responders, and also better collaboration around planning. Education was a key, education both in terms of fire prevention, the old Smokey the Bear thing, in terms of don't throw your cigarettes out the window, start early, let the kids educate their parents if they're not prepared to learn now. But also education on climate change and the need for adaptation. And then there was also a comment around education in farmers about how, when, why, and how to burn in terms of getting rid of the feedstock on their properties. Definitely a point about learning from First Nations, learning from the practices of First Nations, but not just learning, beginning to re-implement them, and also to respect nature. There was the option of learning from other jurisdictions, how do they respond appropriately to fires, and can we learn from that? And then also finally to ensure that there's appropriate government funding to deal, the appropriate levels of government funding to deal with the resources that we need. Thank you.